Today, I'm going to be ranking transfers that the media are reporting are close to happening. Now, we've got 20 different transfers that are gradually getting closer to completion, or rumours that have some serious validity behind them. We've got 5 different categories. You know how this is going to work. Let's crack on. We'll start with a transfer that by the time you see this video might well have already been made official. It is, of course, Joao Felix rejoining Chelsea. Now, the fee for this move is a reported £46 million, including add-ons. Of course, the Samu Omorodian deal collapsed. Conor Gallagher was left in limbo. We're going to talk about him in just a second. And that has led to the re-emergence of Joao Felix as a serious target and signing. Now, I personally would put this probably in why though? You know, they signed Joao Felix for 6 months on loan originally, and no doubt about it, he's very talented. It's clear he has bags of natural ability. But what's also clear is that 6-month loan period wasn't enough to push Chelsea into a concerted effort to make it permanent. Atletico Madrid have wanted to offload for quite some time now. If Chelsea had really wanted to get that deal done then, they would have. And yes, clearly, the finances, they've come right down. It is a cheaper option. But is this a move that is being made simply to facilitate a Conor Gallagher exit? Because the volume of players Chelsea have that want to play either in the 10 space or in one of the inside channels from a wide area, or a player that can play as a false 9, are crazy. I've got some of the names in front of me here. You think Mudryk wants to play on the left, and Nkunku can play in a 10 or a left, Neto left or right, Palmer right, left or 10, Madueke on the right, Sterling still on the books, left or right. They've got Esteval, who is one of the biggest talents in Brazil, arriving in 12 months' time, Kendry Paez arriving as well, and now Joao Felix. We also saw Enzo Fernandez play as a 10 at the weekend. Where do all these players fit? So if this deal is being done just to facilitate an exit for Conor Gallagher, I don't really get it. If they're signing him because they believe in his talent, which of the players I've just read out are going to be sold? And does that natural ability from Joao Felix usurp those factors? This is a player who's never started more than 21 league games in a season. If Samu Omorodian hadn't collapsed, would Joao Felix have joined? Let's be honest with our answers here. The answer is no. Whilst we're on the topic of Joao Felix, let's talk about Conor Gallagher. Do you know what? Just because of the treatment of him, I'm putting it in love it. I feel like being made to train by himself, being made to fly over there, wait in hotels, flying back, being caught in limbo from both clubs, it's been a shambles. But I do think he's a very Diego Simeone style midfielder. Don't think he's going to require massive output like Chelsea fans wanted in terms of goals and assists from him playing in that 10 space. A lot of his best work, Conor Gallagher, is done off the ball. And that's probably what Simeone wants. Conor's not the only Chelsea player leaving, of course. We heard the news last night that Armando Broja is close to joining Ipswich Town on loan with a £30 million obligation to buy if they stay in the Premier League. Now, I haven't got his image down in this list, but this feels like a big feat. Maybe it's just me. You know, the best we've seen from Broja was that stint at Southampton. He topped out at 6 goals since then with a major injury. There hasn't been loads of development. I think this one's a risk. Next up, we're going to Sander Berge, who is on the verge of joining Fulham. A medical has been completed at £25 million. I think this is a really good deal for Fulham. It looks like they have addressed the exit of Joao Felix. I've spoken about in loads of videos this summer with the links to Scott McTominay, the sign of Emile Smith-Rowe. Who's going to play in the deeper positions? We saw on Friday night Andreas Pereira being asked to do that alongside Sasa Lukic. Well, Sander Berge, I think, is a big upgrade on both of those players in that area. What he isn't going to give you that Joao Felix did is huge ground coverage, massive tackle and interception numbers. But what he does add is great progressive carry numbers. These are his championship numbers. So in a side that is slightly more ball dominant, a team that wants to keep possession like Fulham do, you can see he is an excellent dribbler of the ball. Really hard to get it off him in tight spaces. I think him combining with another midfielder, allowing Emile Smith-Rowe to sit in that 10 space, Alex Iwobi playing on the wing, it's a much more understandable dynamic to the midfield. I think this is a good move, and I think it's a better fit than Scott McTominay was at Fulham if he was going to be asked to play in that 6. Whilst we're on the topic of midfielders, my thing's glitched here. I don't know why he's not involved, but I have got Matt O'Reilly to Brighton down. Looks like it's going to be a record fee being received by Celtic. And you have to say, Brighton's spending power this summer has been impressive. People keep saying, don't they, on social media, how are Brighton spending 200 million? How are they spending 150 million? Well, Chelsea have literally given them about 200 million pounds in the last 2 years for staff and player cost. But nevertheless, I still love their business. I love the forward line additions in the likes of Minter and Gruder. I still thought the midfield needed goals. What have they done? They've gone out and signed the best goal-scoring midfielder in Scotland, and a player that was putting up 0.6 assists per 90 last season. I'm sure they'll be hoping he can cover some of Gross's creativity, whereas Vifa is covering his progression, his defensive know-how, and now some positional sense. Matt O'Reilly brings dynamism, pace, aggression, goal-scoring from the midfield. It's another great buy. Next up, we've got West Ham's impending signing of Carlos Soler, of course, the Spanish PSG midfielder, who's still just 27 years of age. You might well remember him from his Valencia days as that sort of creative, goal-scoring midfielder, the back-to-back seasons in Valencia where he put up 11 goals in each campaign. But at PSG, much like a lot of players, it's been a bit stop-start. He hasn't been able to get a foothold in the team. More substitute appearances than starts last season. And to be honest with you, I don't think you should take that at face value. I don't think that means he's a bad player. It just means there is some elite level quality around him in that PSG side. But even in those limited midfield minutes, what you saw was a player who wants to play quite advanced. He wants to pick the ball up, get shots off from the edge of the area. His, XG numbers, his creative numbers, all very strong. If you run the clock back to his final season in La Liga, he was a real creative force. And that is probably the reason West Ham are looking to add him. When I look at the balance of their midfield, players like James Ward-Prowse, Thomas Souček in there, could they be upgraded with a player like Carlos Soler's ability on the ball, partnering the likes of Lucas Paquetá, who still has the allegations of betting hanging over him and a potential ban on the horizon. Guido Rodriguez and Edson Alvarez want to play a little bit deeper. Carlos Soler feels like a profile they don't necessarily have. And with the sale of Flynn Downs, who clearly wasn't in the manager's plans long term, funding this move, it feels like the final piece of the puzzle in this summer's recruitment for West Ham. I'm going to say this is a good deal. Next up, we're going to go to Joe Gomez, and we haven't got a club linked with him. We're just going to talk about his potential exit, which certainly feels like it's picking up pace after being left out of the squad at the weekend. He's not the only one either. It seems like Sepp van den Berg is getting closer to a £20 million exit from Liverpool. That's a great fee. I think that's a great fee for Liverpool. A player that they've barely seen wear the red shirt. Yes, he had a fantastic season at Mainz last year, probably their player of the year, but it's almost free money. Now, if we rewind the clock back to the end of June, the PSR deadline, let's not forget that Gomez was part of a deal that involved Anthony Gordon going to Liverpool, Gomez plus cash going to Newcastle. So it's not a huge surprise that he is going to be leaving the club. Clearly, he wasn't part of the first team plans. The left back zone feels like Tsimikas is going to be a backup. He obviously operated a lot there last year, and at centre-back during pre-season and in the first game, Joao Felix has been the starting partner for Van Dijk. We saw Konate come on. So where are the minutes for Joe Gomez going to come from? And he feels like quite a sellable asset. Newcastle agreed at £40 million for him. That is quite a big fee. So if Liverpool can get a fee like that for a player who has, to be honest with you, been a bit part in recent seasons. Yes, last year, 32 appearances, but still only 17 of them starts. The campaign before that, 15 starts. Really, since that 2020 season, he hasn't been able to maintain a serious foothold in the starting 11. If Liverpool can get £40 million for a player with these numbers, it's good business. But where does he go? I want to hear from you guys at home. What club suits Joe Gomez? We've seen Villa linked, obviously Newcastle still linked with the Mark Gahey deal. We've also seen Crystal Palace linked. For me, all of those teams would be getting a good player. But we don't know the fee at the moment. We haven't seen any numbers banded around that aren't PSR numbers. So I'm just going to put it in the middle tier for now because we don't know exactly the club and we don't know exactly the fee. Next up, we've got Raheem Sterling, whose team, of course, put out that statement shortly before kickoff at the weekend after he was left out of the squad to face Manchester City. I don't agree with the timing of it, but this sort of situation just feels kind of sad. Raheem Sterling, for large portions of his career at Manchester City, was on a trajectory to go down as one of the greatest wingers in Premier League history. And now we're at a situation where his career is dwindling. He's got 3 years left on a contract that's worth £350,000 a week. And who's paying that? Because he was really signed in that first sort of batch of players that Chelsea went for that was part of a very different signing style to what they're doing now. Now they're targeting these young players, long contracts. Back in that original summer, I think of Aubameyang, I think of Koulibaly, I think of Sterling. None of these players really fit into that model now. Sterling's the last one left. If we're honest, I think Chelsea would like to sell Raheem Sterling. But do I think there's a suitor? This is a serious question we have to ask about these transfers. Who is the suitor for Raheem Sterling? Because this is a player on massive wages. The only way I see Raheem Sterling leaving the club is on loan. And if that happens, I think somebody might be getting a pretty decent player. Still, his numbers last season were solid. 12 goal involvements in 22 starts, 12 goal involvements in 1900 league minutes. Not exceptional. And there were certainly big moments in there that you think, dear oh dear, the lack of squaring, for instance, when he goes through one-on-one, was it away at Wolves, immediately stands out in my mind. But if somebody can get Raheem Sterling on loan, not paying his wages, they're going to get a 29-year-old, one of the most experienced Premier League players possible, with fairly decent goal output. I know Chelsea fans are hammering me right now, but for one of the mid-level clubs, he's an option. But he's only an option if the wage packet changes, and I just don't see Chelsea sanctioning that. For now, it's a nope, because I can't physically process somebody being able to afford that loan, or Chelsea willing to sanction it and pay the wages just to get him out of the club. I don't know. Next up, we've got Arsenal's goalkeeping situation. We've got Aaron Ramsdale to come. This was in a random order, of course. And Joan Garcia, heavily linked with the club. Fabrizio reporting that personal terms have already been agreed. Now, you would think this is the backup should Aaron Ramsdale leave the club, which is looking increasingly likely. Joan Garcia would probably come in as the second choice to David Raya. And it's easy to see why they're looking at Joan Garcia stylistically and in terms of profile. Profile's very similar to David Raya, doesn't he? You know, one thing David Raya is going to give you, and Arteta loves about him, for instance, is the amount of crosses he claims, how dominating he is in his zone. For instance, his number of crosses stopped, the percentage, top 1%. 13% of crosses stopped into the box. That is a big tick in his box in the way Arteta wants his goalkeeper to play. You look at Joan Garcia, we're at 16%. One of the 4 or 5 best goalkeepers in Europe's top 5 leagues for crosses stopped last season. Coming in as a backup understudy, it's hard to deny. On the surface of it, this feels like a good deal. But they still need the midfielder. I still think they need another forward. So does that make you want to drop it down to meh? I think for now, it probably does. Let's go to Scott McTominay's exit next, and it feels like the move to Fulham has pretty much collapsed at this stage, given that Sander Berge has joined the club. If they do choose to proceed with McTominay, you'd hope that it's no longer in that 6 role and he's going to play in more advanced areas, contribute to goals, because what we know about Scott McTominay, his best attributes are his box crashing, finishing and shooting areas. Does that suit Fulham? I don't know whether they particularly need it. As for Manchester United, this is a player approaching the final year of his contract. They do have the +1 option as well. But what I keep coming back to with McTominay is, yes, United need to sell players and a squad overhaul needs to happen. But is McTominay one of those players you want to sell? An academy player who contributes big time coming off the bench. It's probably what he's best at, coming off the bench 80 plus minutes onwards. Unless somebody is going to give you a decent fee, I would be tempted just to keep him as a squad player. Never seems to moan. Ultimate professional. It's kind of like, do you really need to let him go? Is there not other players on the books that you'd let go ahead of McTominay? Next up, we've got the big news. Joachim Andersen to Fulham. Now, David Ornstein reporting a £30 million fee has been agreed. It looks like this deal is going to happen. And, I mean, this is unbelievable business by Fulham, it feels like. On the surface of it, a 28-year-old experienced pro to lead the back line. He's, of course, got previous links to Fulham, having been there on loan under Scotty Parker, which has probably made this move a little bit easier, hasn't it? The fact he lives in in London, knows the club, knows the people there. But again, from Crystal Palace's perspective, I would be really worried if him and Gahey leave the club. But I do think it'd be a positive signing for Fulham. You know, Cuenca has come in. It feels like he's going to be a backup to Bassi, given that left-footed nature. An okay season at Villarreal last year, 21 starts, wasn't it? But Villarreal's defensive record was appalling. I think the third worst by goals conceded in the entirety of La Liga. So you've got Cuenca backing up Bassi, but who's backing up Diop? Now that Tosin's left, does Diop become a backup? Andersen would obviously start in this side. I think arguably that is a smart bit of business. I would say if they can get Andersen for 30 odd million pounds, the ability on the ball, his concentration levels as a leader at the back, his consistency of starts, they've gone 30, 32, 32, 38, his progressive pass numbers, better than Diop's. Yeah, it would be a good deal if they can get this one done. I would just be so surprised to see Palace let him go. Let's talk about Ilkay Gundogan's potential return to Manchester City, which seems to be gathering pace. And it's clear. You gotta love this move. This would be an awesome transfer. Now, I think some people might be under the sort of false impression that last season was not good for Ilkay Gundogan. Why are they selling him? Why would they want to let him go? Well, this is Barcelona. Basket case Barcelona. Firstly, they need the money. They need his wages off the books. They can't register Dani Olmo. It's all gone wrong again behind the scenes. They're cash strapped, and Gundogan is an asset they believe somebody might take for free. They can get his big wages off the books. Who saw that coming? But nevertheless, let's talk about the return to Manchester City, because in my mind, this makes an awful lot of sense. Like I said, he was good last season. He played the most La Liga minutes of any player in the Barcelona squad. His underlying numbers were, again, exceptional. 0.5 non-penalty expected goals and assists, receiving the ball in great areas, a fantastic ball progressor, ball carrier, can play multiple positions, and importantly for Manchester City, with Julian Alvarez leaving the side, we've seen Ilkay Gundogan in the past play as the false nine. When Haaland was not available, when Aguero was not available, we've seen Ilkay Gundogan step forward and score volumes of goals for City. Take, for instance, his final 3 seasons at Man City. 13 goals in that 2020-2021 campaign, then back-to-back 8-goal seasons. Huge moments as well, clinical finishing that effectively got them over the line in title pushes. He's a leader in the dressing room. Everybody at the club loves him. He's already had a conversation with Pep Guardiola. It feels like Gundogan's return would be a massive feel-good story for Man City. It would lift the mood of everybody around. The fans want it to happen. Guarantee you the players want to happen. I think this would be one of the signings of the window. Gundogan coming back on a free, it'd be that good. Okay, let's quickly touch on Manuel Ugarte. We've been talking about it all summer. The deal felt like it was not going to happen. Well, it feels like in the last couple of days, in the last 48 hours, there's been a bit of a resurfacing here, a loan with an obligation to buy. Now, I still think United are going to want to shift players before they get this deal done. If this happens, I could see it almost being a deadline day move. They've done some pretty good business so far, offloading the likes of Greenwood, Wan-Bissaka, Pellistri, Campuala, Donny, for over £60 million. But they spent quite a lot too, £160 million worth of additions, so about £100 million net. I could imagine United wanting to shift at least 1 or 2 more players, probably the likes of Sancho, Eriksen, looking at this squad now, Hannibal, Scott McTominay, I could see leaving. So if that's the case, and United want to hit that net spend of £60 million, they don't really have much wiggle room to spend on Manuel Ugarte. So would Manuel Ugarte arriving on loan be a positive move? Well, it would certainly add more depth behind Casemiro, a position that I think United need. Casemiro, can he be relied upon to play 40 or 50 games this season? I don't think he can. Last season's injury record was pretty spotty. Toby Collier has had a great pre-season, but is he ready to step into those shoes? I personally think the Ugarte deal on loan makes an awful lot of sense for both parties. PSG get his wages off the books. Obviously, with the Joao Neves arrival, United get a backup to Casemiro, a player who can compete in that first team spot. He does a lot of what Casemiro does well, even better. You think of his defensive numbers, tackles and interceptions, the most tackles in his final season in Portugal. Last year, the most tackles of any player in Ligue 1. His interception numbers are freakish. 7+ tackles and interceptions per 90. These are not normal numbers. But where he doesn't have a classic Elite 6 profiles numbers are his on-the-ball ability. You know, I've seen people talking about him being like Kante or being like Fabinho. These players, people say, they didn't have the progressive numbers. They were destroyers in there, but they did. Like, it's a bit of a myth. Kante, you think back to his best season, he was putting up top 10%, top 15% of progressive pass numbers of any midfielder in Europe. Fabinho at his best, top 15, top 10% of progressive pass numbers of any midfielder in Europe. Manuel Ugarte at the moment, still a lot younger than those guys, but is in the bottom 20% of midfielders for progressive passes and progressive carries. These are numbers that would need to improve, but I still think it would be a positive move to get that deal over the line. On loan, I like it. Let's go to Maxence Lacroix to Crystal Palace, which continues to evolve. A bid is reported to have gone in now. He's still just got 1 year left on his contract at Wolfsburg. We spoke about him in recent episodes being a really nice fit for that Crystal Palace back three. I'd say this is a good deal if you can get him for, you know, sub 20 million euros. He's got that 1 year left on his contract. I think he's physically very ready for the Premier League, given his height, his pace, his on-the-ball ability is solid. So it's a good signing, but Palace, just watch yourselves now. Aaron Ramsdale to Wolves is the next rumour I want to speak about. This has picked up some pace after David Ornstein revealed Wolves had made a loan bid for Aaron Ramsdale. I'm a little bit confused. Does this mean, you know, we've seen rumblings of Jose Sarr potentially leaving the club. Does this mean Jose Sarr is actually going to leave the club? And if so, are they signing Ramsdale to replace Sarr, or are they getting rid of Sarr because they want to sign Ramsdale? Two big questions there. And the reason I asked them is that Jose Sarr, you know, over the last couple of years, last year especially, his post-shot expected goals numbers are exceptional. The best goalkeeper in the league in terms of shot stopping. Statistically, anyway. Like, he is a monster at keeping the ball out of his net. Yes, he might not be great with the ball at his feet, and he might be 30 years old, but that's a big ask of Aaron Ramsdale to step in and fill his shoes. Maybe Wolves are looking to go in a different direction, play a higher line, play a goalkeeper who's more comfortable on the ball. That probably is Aaron Ramsdale. If that's the case, fair enough. But if Jose Sarr is being moved on, those are big gloves to fill. Aaron Ramsdale, not the worst option to do it, but I'm just surprised to see them moving on from Sarr. Next up, we've got Mamardashvili, of course, the Georgian goalkeeper at Valencia, joining Liverpool. Now, this deal appears to be getting close at around £30 million. He won't be joining this summer. It will be a long-term project play, a replacement for Alisson in years to come. He is one of the 2 or 3 most outstanding goalkeepers in Europe for his age. His numbers and underlying data last season in La Liga was disgusting. You look at the La Liga-wide goalkeeping numbers and, I mean, that's a disgrace, isn't it? He saved 10 more goals than he should have for Valencia last season. And this is clearly a signing for the future, maybe 2025, maybe even 2026. You'd think they'd sign him and loan him back to Valencia. Of course, they can't sign him and loan him to a Premier League club. That would be a breach of regulations. But if that is the case, it's smart future planning. The reason that I kind of have it in meh as we stand here today is like, I still feel like Liverpool have got work to do in the midfield and signing a 6. Do they need to be prioritising a backup goalkeeper when Kelleher hasn't yet been sold, that isn't going to arrive until 2025, 2026? I think if they ended the summer with just Mamardashvili as a future signing for a year's time at 40 million euros, it would be smart in the future, but I think we would all be left thinking Liverpool's window has been a bit underwhelming. Let's go to Nottingham Forest and their pursuit of a number 9. Chris Wood scoring straight away again. The goal-scoring monster who bagged 14 last season and has consistently throughout his career hit 10-plus Premier League goals. He is ageing though, and Taiwo Awoniyi's injury record is a bit spotty. Last time I did a video on Santiago Jimenez, Forest fans in the comments were saying, we need another striker. We need another number 9. These two cannot be relied upon across a full Premier League campaign. And it appears Forest have heard your calls. Bids have gone in for Santiago Jimenez and Eddie Nketiah for what feels like a similar level fee, around about that £25 million mark. Now, Eddie Nketiah, he is slightly older, but he does have that Premier League proven experience. His goal-scoring numbers, they've been okay, but it's hard to judge him because he himself has never really been given a starting berth in a Premier League side. Whereas Santiago Jimenez, a couple of years younger, just 23 years old, coming off the back of an amazing campaign at Feyenoord, putting up absolutely eye-watering expected goals numbers in the 0.7 non-penalty XG per 90 sort of range, which is, scary, but it's in the Eredivisie. And how do those numbers translate to the Premier League? Not always consistently. So I think you can only put one of these guys in good deal, because they're not going to sign both. Eddie Nketiah or Santiago Jimenez. Let me know who you would choose in the comments below. I think I'm just going to side with Eddie Nketiah and put Santiago Jimenez in meh, because I don't think they're going to let him go for as much as Eddie Nketiah. I think I could see Feyenoord demanding 50 million euros. If 50 million euros starts getting talked about, it's a lot of money. Eddie Nketiah I could see going for like 28 plus 2 or 28 plus 3, that sort of range. And it's probably worth a shot at that range. Mikel Merino's deal still hasn't got over the line, despite the fact I remember talking about this happening like a month ago. I don't know what's gone on. Clearly, Arsenal are haggling hard over what is 5 or 10 million euros. And fair enough, because they don't need this player to come in and have an instant impact. I think Thomas Partey and Rice look very solid again on the weekend. Of course, Mikel Merino, excellent on the ball. But also, what does Mikel Arteta love? He loves dual winners. Mikel Merino, the highest percentage of duels won of any player in La Liga last year. The highest volume of any player's duels won last year. A beast, 6'2", physical, rangy. That Arsenal team is just huge, isn't it? And when you combine that with 1 year left on his contract, I don't think they're in a rush to pay any sort of fee. Overall, it's just a good deal. It's smart business to hold out. We're set. We don't have to sign him, but we'd like to sign him. And I think at the end of the day, Sociedad will come back to the table and do a deal a little bit cheaper than we're expecting. Next up, we've got Mark Guehi's move to Newcastle, which feels like after the Andersen sale, it might be kind of dead. Now, by the time you guys watch this, news might well have changed, but as we stand here today, Newcastle have had a £60 million bid rejected. They're weighing up to go in for another one. And Palace's bargaining position has just got a whole lot stronger. They already had the Elise money in their back pocket. Now they've got the Andersen money in their pocket too. Is there a real need to sell? Mark Guehi's value feels like it's only going to increase. He's one of England's best defenders. He's still just 24 years of age. I think the Andersen sale's mud for Newcastle. You combine that with the fact they could potentially use some of the Andersen money, maybe even some of the Elise money to give Guehi a new contract. I'm actually going to put this in good deal from a Palace perspective. Like, good deal getting a new contract. I like it. Last two then, we've got Ivan Toney, who is close to a move to Al Ahly. No, come on. It's just such a letdown move going to Saudi, I think, at his stage of his career. I wanted to see him get back to his best. I wanted to see him have impacts at a club that was battling for European football. Going to Saudi. Really? And finally, we've got Christian Eriksen to Ajax. £5 million. The state Ajax are in right now. Does Christian Eriksen come in and have a big impact in that midfield? I think it's a bit of a meh deal, that one. I think he will leave Man United, but I don't see it being to Ajax. Okay, so there were some of the deals that are close to happening. Let me know your favourite in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. We'll see you later.